Over the past 2 years, an astonishing amount of money has flowed into artificial intelligence, surpassing $10 trillion in total investment. This extraordinary influx of capital has driven stock prices of key industry players to dizzying heights. Take Nvidia, for example. Its stock price has soared from a modest $150 to well beyond $900 per share, reflecting just how bullish the market is about the future of AI. Meanwhile, tech giants like Microsoft have committed staggering sums, allocating around $60 billion specifically toward building the infrastructure necessary for AI development. Other largest corporations, Google, Amazon, Meta, and many more, are pouring their resources into AI with unwavering confidence, seemingly betting everything on its potential. Jensen Huang, the CEO of Nvidia, has openly stated that AI is poised to revolutionize every industry it touches, hinting at a profound transformation of the global economic landscape. Similarly, experts like Sam Altman predict that artificial general intelligence, or AGI, the highly anticipated next leap in AI, is just a matter of years away. This sense of urgency and possibility has spurred investors to inject their capital with abandon, behaving as if there's no tomorrow, eager to capitalize on what they perceive as the next unstoppable wave of technological progress. However, there's a crucial aspect that remains largely unspoken amid this hype. The underlying math doesn't add up. Despite the hundreds of billions of dollars funneled into AI research and infrastructure, industries are struggling to generate proportionate returns. The actual revenue streams from AI applications are nowhere near what the investment levels would justify, and the array of real-world use cases remains surprisingly limited at present. Additionally, the costs involved in developing, deploying, and maintaining these systems are astronomically high, vastly higher than many anticipated just a few years ago. This entire scenario resembles the classic dot-com bubble, but it is significantly larger and more widespread. The magnitude of the current bubble surpasses any previous insurrection of speculative investing in technology. To put it plainly, the pattern repeats. A new technology emerges, influential voices proclaim its unprecedented importance, investors pour billions into it, and stock prices skyrocket on hype alone. Yet, sooner or later, reality strikes the market. The technology, while undeniably functional, often fails to scale up to the grand claims made about it. Revenue generation falls short, and the promising valuations evaporate. Companies that have invested massive sums find themselves facing bankruptcy, leading to market crashes and wealth wiped out overnight. This cycle has played out multiple times throughout history. In the 19th century, the rapid expansion of railroads ended in collapse when the promised infrastructure benefits didn't materialize across the entire network. The advent of radio in the 1920s brought hype that was eventually tempered by the realization that mass broadcasting would fall short of initial expectations. The dot-com boom and bust of the early 2000s exemplified similar highs and lows as companies with little sustainable revenue collapsed, dragging stock markets down with them. More recently, the surge of cryptocurrency hype around 2021 resulted in a sharp downturn, exposing the volatility inherent in unproven digital assets. Now, in the current era of AI, the same pattern is unfolding, not because AI doesn't work, but because the expectations placed upon it are wildly exaggerated. The levels of investment are astronomical, and the actual revenue models remain hazy or non-existent. Let's analyze the situation in more detail, starting with the sheer scale of spending. To give a clearer picture, during the year 2023 alone, firms allocated approximately $200 billion solely for AI infrastructure. This sum covered the costs of data centers, specialized chips, power supplies, cooling systems, and all other necessary physical hardware to train and operate AI models. As we moved into 2024, this figure increased further, reaching around $350 billion, and projections for 2025 point to expenditure exceeding $400 billion. When combined, these investments on infrastructure over just a 3-year span approach the scale of nearly $1 trillion, an amount that's difficult to comprehend or justify solely based on current revenue potential. This staggering figure, however, does not include the money spent separately on research and development or the costs associated with hiring top-tier AI engineers, acquiring promising startups, or developing practical applications of AI. All of these additional expenses compound the overall investment but remain unquantified in the simple infrastructure figures. The critical question, then, who is actually spending all this money? The prominent player here is Nvidia. Although Nvidia isn't spending it directly, it's the primary beneficiary, since the company manufactures the graphics processing units, GPUs, that serve as the backbone for AI computations. In 2022, Nvidia's revenue generated from data center sales stood at around $15 billion. By 2023, that figure had skyrocketed to nearly $47 billion, and in 2024, estimates suggest it will surpass $100 billion. These numbers reflect an increase of roughly 7 times within just 2 years, chiefly driven by sales of their AI-specific chips, such as the H100 and H200 models, priced between $25,000 and $40,000 each. Companies leveraging these chips typically buy tens of thousands at a time, which means that a single AI training cluster, an essential component for developing advanced models, can cost anywhere from $500 million to over $1 billion. Every leading technology company is engaged in constructing multiple such clusters, investing heavily to stay at the forefront of AI development. For instance, Microsoft alone has committed more than $60 billion over the past 2 years to bolster its AI infrastructure. These investments underscore a significant trend. While companies are pouring funds into hardware and infrastructure, they're still unsure about how these investments will translate into sustainable revenue streams or competitive advantages in the long term. This extensive investment landscape encompasses data centers, advanced chips, sophisticated power systems, and strategic acquisitions such as stakes in OpenAI. In total, companies have poured approximately $13 billion directly into OpenAI itself. The remaining hundreds of billions, however, have gone toward building the essential infrastructure necessary to deliver and sustain cutting-edge artificial intelligence services across various platforms and industries. For example, on the infrastructure front, Google alone has committed nearly $50 billion, an enormous sum that underscores their determination to dominate AI capabilities. To achieve this, Google has been developing its own custom chips, known as tensor processing units, or TPUs, alongside purchasing enormous quantities of Nvidia's high-performance GPUs. Similarly, Meta, a key player in the tech sector, has invested over $40 billion in AI research and infrastructure, while Amazon has contributed upwards of $30 billion. These amounts are indicative of the large 5 technology giants, Microsoft, Google, Meta, Amazon, and Nvidia, and their extensive ecosystem of clients, which includes not only these giants themselves, but also companies like Oracle, Tesla, and numerous smaller cloud service providers. Collectively, these corporations have spent more than $300 billion in just the past 2 years alone, and this spending pace shows no signs of slowing. Rather, it continues to accelerate as competition intensifies. This leads us to a vital question at the heart of all this massive investment. What exactly are these companies receiving in return? What kind of revenue are they generating from their gigantic outlays? Because, fundamentally, spending $300 billion is only justified if that money is generating proportional revenue and profit margins that make the investment worthwhile. When we examine the numbers, however, they paint a somewhat different picture, one where the revenue streams are not yet matching the billions spent. To understand this better, let's analyze the financials of each major player individually. Starting with OpenAI, the company that ignited the current AI boom through products like ChatGPT, their revenue, as of late 2024, approaches around $3.5 billion annually. This marks a significant increase from just $1 billion in 2023. Such growth is undeniably impressive and shows strong market traction. Nonetheless, OpenAI is far from profitable. The company has been losing money at an alarming rate, reportedly burning through over $5 billion each year solely on compute costs, expenses incurred as they pay for cloud infrastructure services from Microsoft and other providers. This results in a situation where their revenue, roughly $3.5 billion, does not nearly cover their over $5 billion annual costs, leading to a sizable $2 billion yearly deficit. Despite this, OpenAI's valuation has soared to approximately $150 billion, which implies a valuation of about 43 times their revenue. Such a high multiple indicates that investors are valuing the potential and future growth prospects of the company, even though it is currently operating at a significant loss. Moving on to Microsoft, a company that has integrated artificial intelligence into nearly every aspect of its ecosystem. The picture is complex. Their AI offerings include products like Copilot within Microsoft Office, Azure AI services, and the integration of ChatGPT into Bing Search. While these developments are game-changing, the precise revenue generated specifically from these AI components remains unclear, as Microsoft does not provide detailed breakdowns. Government estimates suggest that artificial intelligence may add approximately $10 to $15 billion annually to Microsoft's overall revenue, a notable contribution, but still a fraction of their huge financial scale. Given that the company has invested around $60 billion in building and deploying AI infrastructure, it would take roughly 4 to 6 years for their AI-related revenue to fully cover their investments, assuming that revenue remains steady and that costs do not increase further. A rather optimistic scenario. Moreover, this calculation does not account for potential fluctuations or technological hurdles that could alter timelines. Turning to Google, their core AI revenue primarily derives from cloud AI services, as well as from integrating AI functionalities into their search engine and advertising platforms. While precise figures are not disclosed publicly, estimates indicate that AI-related revenue for Google might be around $15 to $20 billion per year. Google spent roughly $50 billion on AI infrastructure, meaning that, under optimistic estimates, the company could reach a break-even point within about 3 to 4 years. It's important to note, however, that a considerable portion of Google's AI development, such as their Gemini project, is offered free of charge for most users. The company is effectively giving away access to powerful AI tools to maintain competitive pressure against platforms like ChatGPT. Providing a product that incurs billions of dollars in operational costs without direct revenue from it isn't a traditional profit model. Instead, it's a strategic move aimed at safeguarding market share and preventing competitors from gaining dominance. Similarly, Meta has made significant investments, more than $40 billion, focused on integrating artificial intelligence into their core advertising business and content recommendations. These AI capabilities genuinely enhance Meta's primary revenue stream, advertising, by improving targeting precision and content relevance. However, new AI-driven products like Meta AI Assistant have yet to generate meaningful revenue. They remain largely experimental and are cost centers rather than revenue generators. Most users do not pay directly for Meta's AI features. Rather, the company spends tens of billions simply to improve its ad algorithms, which in turn can boost ad revenue. While this indirect effect is beneficial, isolating the specific incremental revenue attributable solely to AI advancements remains challenging. Overall, Meta's substantial spending on AI is aimed at strengthening its foundational business rather than directly generating new income streams. In summary, while the magnitude of these investments in AI infrastructure, ranging from tens to hundreds of billions of dollars, is staggering, the immediate financial returns do not yet justify the enormous outlays. Companies are still in the early, high-cost phases of building and deploying AI systems, and the revenue streams from these investments are only beginning to emerge or remain somewhat uncertain. It's clear that the true value of these investments will depend on their ability to generate sustainable profits and competitive advantages in the years to come. Until then, their massive expenditures serve both as a strategic positioning and a testament to the fiercely competitive race for AI dominance. Amazon's investments in artificial intelligence largely revolve around its AWS cloud services, notably through the development of Alexa, the virtual assistant, and efforts to enhance fulfillment and logistics operations. These AI-driven initiatives have been substantial, with the company generating an estimated revenue of perhaps about $10 to $15 billion from its AI-related services and products. In stark contrast, however, Amazon has invested an enormous amount of resources, roughly $30 billion, over recent years to develop and deploy these AI capabilities. It's important to understand that, despite this significant outlay of capital, the company has yet to reach any point of financial break-even. This process, seemingly endless, could take many more years, especially considering the historical pattern in the tech industry where such heavy investments often require long periods before showing any tangible profit. When it comes to Alexa, the virtual assistant which has been part of Amazon's ecosystem for a full decade, the situation remains unchanged. Despite continuous development, Alexa has never proven to be a profitable venture. The company consistently reports billions of dollars in annual losses associated with Alexa's operation. Simply putting more artificial intelligence into a product that is already a money loser will not rectify or improve its financial standing. In fact, it often exacerbates the situation. Now, let's examine the overall picture more broadly. Over the past 2 years, the largest technology companies, often called the Big Five, have collectively spent well over $300 billion on artificial intelligence development and deployment. In all likelihood, these corporations have generated somewhere around $60 to $80 billion in revenue from AI products and services during that same period. Much of this revenue derives from embedding AI functionalities into existing offerings, such as search advertising and cloud computing platforms, rather than from completely new, standalone AI products. Examples of these newer AI offerings include subscriptions for advanced AI-powered tools, akin to ChatGPT's Copilot features or AI assistants. These innovative services might contribute approximately $10 to $15 billion per year to the company's total income. Summing it up, however, reveals a stark imbalance. With an expenditure exceeding $300 billion to produce only about $10 to $15 billion in new revenue each year, the ratio of spending to revenue approaches 20 to 1. To put it simply, if this pattern persists, generating this level of revenue would require a span of roughly 20 years solely to cover the initial costs, an entire lifetime in the rapidly evolving world of technology. In that time frame, the technological landscape would likely change multiple times over, rendering the original investments possibly obsolete or vastly outdated. The situation becomes even more problematic because such revenue figures are heavily dependent on the assumption that growth in AI-related income will continue unabated. But what if that growth stalls or peaks earlier than expected? For instance, if AI revenue hits its maximum around the year 2025 or 2026, then all those billions spent would have been for a temporary spike, and long-term profitability would be out of reach. Some evidence suggests that such a slowdown or plateauing trend may already be emerging. The question then arises, what are the actual use cases of AI that justify these enormous investments? Because, without a doubt, AI is undeniably impressive. It can produce text, generate images, analyze vast datasets, and even write or assist in coding. These capabilities are, without question, real and valuable. But the more critical question is whether businesses and consumers are willing to pay enough for these features to make the investments worthwhile. Currently, the answer is largely negative. Most AI products available on the market today are priced very modestly, roughly between $10 to $20 per month for individual users. For example, ChatGPT Plus charges around $20, Microsoft's Copilot subscription costs about $30, and Google's premium AI service within Google One is also approximately $20 per month. To generate significant revenue from such modest price points, the companies need to attract hundreds of millions of paying subscribers. Taking just ChatGPT as an example, by late 2024, it had amassed around 10 million paying users. At a monthly fee of $20, this results in a recurring monthly revenue of about $200 million, or around $2.4 billion annually. This sum accounts for what can be called the consumer subscription revenue. Besides these individual consumers, the company also benefits from enterprise clients who pay higher prices for customized solutions. When combining all sources of income, OpenAI's total revenue approaches approximately $3.5 billion a year. However, even with this seemingly large subscriber base, the costs associated with running such AI services are extraordinarily high, primarily due to the enormous computational power required. As a consequence, despite the growing revenue streams, these companies are still losing billions of dollars each year. To turn a profit, they face two major options: significantly raising subscription prices which risks losing many subscribers or drastically cutting costs, an achievement that would require revolutionary improvements in efficiency that are not guaranteed to happen anytime soon. Similar patterns are observed with other AI services. Microsoft's Copilot, for example, has fewer than 5 million paying users and charging around $30 per month. It brings in roughly $1.8 billion annually. Google's premium AI offering has an even smaller user base, probably only around 2 million subscribers, resulting in annual revenue of approximately $500 million. These figures, though seemingly substantial, are far from enough to justify the incredible sums invested in AI development, especially considering that growth in these subscriptions has begun to slow significantly. In fact, ChatGPT's growth in subscribers has reached a plateau. The initial surge of users eager to try out the technology has subsided, giving way to a steady state where new subscribers are roughly balancing out the number of cancellations. This pattern indicates that the product has found its market, yet that market remains smaller than what the companies had hoped for. Corporate adoption, enterprises integrating AI tools into their workflows, is also progressing at a slow pace. In conclusion, despite the undeniable technological advances AI offers, the economic model underpinning its current implementation appears flawed and unsustainable in the long run. The enormous investments made over the past couple of years, contrasted with the relatively modest and slowing revenue growth, suggest that the true financial viability of these ventures remains uncertain. Without breakthroughs in efficiency or a significant increase in consumers and businesses willing to pay much higher prices, the dream of rapid, profitable AI growth will likely remain elusive for quite some time. While many companies are actively exploring the potential of artificial intelligence, the reality remains that deploying such sophisticated systems on a large scale presents significant financial and logistical challenges. Implementing AI across an entire organization is far from straightforward. It involves complex integration with existing technological infrastructures, extensive training programs for employees to ensure effective utilization, meticulous management of data privacy and security concerns, and substantial financial investment. This combination of factors makes scaling AI a costly endeavor, and many organizations are discovering that, while AI can enhance efficiency, the improvements tend to be only marginal rather than revolutionary. For instance, a comprehensive study conducted by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology revealed that AI coding assistants, such as GitHub's Copilot, can boost programmers' productivity by approximately 26%. Although this represents a meaningful gain, it falls short of triggering dramatic transformations in how software development is conducted. Moreover, such improvements do not come close to justifying the enormous infrastructure and operational expenses involved in deploying these tools at scale. The financial aspect is intertwined with the inherent costs associated with running AI systems, a point that makes the current AI hype bubble particularly evident. Operating and maintaining these models is extraordinarily expensive, proving almost absurd in magnitude. For example, training a large language model similar to GPT-4 alone is estimated to cost well over $100 million, primarily covering the vast computational resources required during the initial training phase. Once deployed, there are ongoing costs tied to inference, the process of generating responses to user inputs. Every interaction with models like ChatGPT incurs a cost of roughly 1 to 4 cents, depending on the length and complexity of the query. Although that may seem negligible for individual users, multiplying this expense by billions of queries quickly adds up. Suppose ChatGPT handles 10 billion inquiries each month. This translates into monthly compute expenditures ranging from around $100 million to $400 million. Over the course of a year, this results in annual inference costs estimated to be between $1.2 billion and $5 billion, solely for query processing. Despite ongoing advancements, these costs are not decreasing significantly. While newer chips from manufacturers like Nvidia offer improved efficiency and software optimizations help to some extent, the fundamental expense of training and running large AI models remains enormous. Furthermore, as artificial intelligence progresses toward even more powerful and capable models, such as GPT-5 or Google's upcoming Gemini Ultra, the costs are projected to escalate rather than diminish. Each new iteration demands more intensive training, larger datasets, and increased computational resources, which in turn lead to higher financial outlays. For example, the cost to train GPT-5 would likely surpass that of GPT-4, just as Gemini Ultra incurs higher expenses than Gemini Pro. This trend points toward a future where the expense of developing and deploying advanced AI models continues to grow. The pattern is clear. More sophisticated models are inherently more costly to create and operate. Consequently, organizations aiming to stay competitive are compelled to invest in ever larger models. However, the downside is equally evident. These hefty investments must be justified by proportionally increased revenue. If revenues do not grow at a faster rate than costs, the financial equation turns unfavorable, leading to mounting losses. Current industry leaders like OpenAI find themselves trapped in this vicious cycle. To maintain their market position and justify their lofty valuations, they must continually release more advanced, capable models. Yet, the cost of achieving such improvements rises in tandem with these goals, placing immense financial pressure on these companies. When the revenue growth fails to keep pace with the escalating costs, the sustainability of such business models comes into serious question. Beyond the pure financial and infrastructural concerns, the environmental impact of large-scale AI is becoming an urgent issue. The energy required to develop and operate these models is staggering, raising alarms about sustainability. Training a single GPT-4 model consumed an estimated 50 gigawatt-hours of electricity, enough to power approximately 5,000 American homes for an entire year during just one training session. Given that organizations often train dozens of similar models, the cumulative energy consumption becomes even more alarming. In addition to training, the power needed to run inference, processing queries, also escalates dramatically. For instance, a single Nvidia H100 chip, designed specifically for high-performance AI computations, draws about 700 watts at full capacity. A data center equipped with 10,000 such chips, a typical setup for mid-sized AI training facilities, would operate at a constant load of around 7 megawatts, which is comparable to a small power plant. Some of the largest AI centers are now building clusters comprising 50,000 to 100,000 chips, consuming between 35 and 70 megawatts continuously, around the clock, every day. The electricity costs for such extensive operations are staggering. At typical commercial electricity rates ranging from 7 to 12 cents per kilowatt hour, running a facility of this magnitude could cost anywhere from about $50 million to $100 million annually solely for power. When cooling systems, which are essential to prevent overheating, are included, these expenses increase by an additional 30 to 50%. Accordingly, a single large AI data center might incur yearly costs in the range of $75 million to $150 million just for powering and cooling. And with many companies constructing multiple competing data centers of similar or even larger scale, the overall environmental and financial burden reaches unprecedented levels. The combination of enormous energy requirements and escalating infrastructure costs underscores a looming sustainability crisis that could challenge the very future of the rapidly expanding AI industry. The overall energy demands associated with artificial intelligence are expected to escalate dramatically, eventually surpassing the total electricity consumption of entire nations. By the year 2027, data centers dedicated to AI processing could require more power than what is consumed by all of Argentina or Sweden combined. Such a scenario is clearly unsustainable and cannot continue for long. The existing power infrastructure cannot expand rapidly enough to keep up with this growing demand, and yet, the environmental consequences of such massive energy use are being largely overlooked amidst the current hype surrounding AI advancements. Turning our attention to the financial markets, especially the stock market, one can see the most conspicuous signs of a bubble forming. Nvidia's stock price, for instance, has soared from approximately $150 in early 2023 to over $900 by late 2024. This represents a six-fold increase within less than 2 years. As a result, Nvidia's market capitalization has surpassed $3 trillion, positioning it among the most valuable corporations worldwide. However, this astronomical valuation is built on a delicate assumption that the rate of AI-related expenditures will either remain steady or continue to grow. Should this spending slow down or come to a halt altogether, Nvidia's revenues would plummet, and consequently, its stock price would also take a severe hit. Currently, Nvidia's price-to-earnings ratio stands at approximately 65, meaning investors are willing to pay $65 for every $1 of annual profit generated by the company. Historically, a P/E ratio exceeding 25 is considered a sign of overvaluation, and once it crosses 50, the stock market is regarded as being in bubble territory. With Nvidia at 65, the company's valuation appears to be based on near perfection. Any disappointment or a downturn in AI chip sales could trigger a precipitous collapse of the stock. This slowdown seems imminent because, realistically, companies cannot sustain spending of $300 to $400 billion annually on AI infrastructure forever. They need to see tangible returns eventually, and when those returns fail to materialize, the spending will be curtailed. Warning signs of this shifting landscape are already emerging. Toward the end of 2024, some startups focused on AI began running out of cash. Those who had raised enormous amounts of funding in 2022 and 2023 had diligently spent their capital on compute resources and hiring sprees. Now, they're entering a phase where they must attempt to raise additional funds, but investor skepticism is growing stronger. Questions are being asked about their actual revenue streams, their clear paths toward profitability, and the timeline for reaching break-even points. Many of these startups are unable to provide convincing answers, revealing that the inflow of fresh capital is not drying up completely, but definitely slowing down. This situation invites a sobering comparison to the dot-com bubble of the late 1990s, since the parallels are quite disturbing. In that era, internet stocks experienced explosive growth. Companies like Pets.com, Webvan, and eToys saw market valuations that soared despite lacking real profits. In March of 2000, the Nasdaq index peaked at 5,000 points, only to crash spectacularly thereafter. By October 2002, it had plunged to around 1,100 points, representing a decline of approximately 78%. This collapse erased roughly $3 trillion in market value. The few companies that managed to survive, such as Amazon, Google, and eBay, had established genuine business models with revenue streams and clear paths to profitability. Many of the others, however, had been driven by hype, traffic, and users, but ultimately had no sustainable financial foundations. Similarly, in 2024, the current scene around AI strongly resembles the internet bubble of the late 1990s. There is an enormous amount of hype, sky-high valuations, and little to no real revenue to justify such valuations. The underlying technology itself is indeed real. Unlike the internet of that era, AI's existence and development are undeniable. But the inflated valuations are based on assumptions that are unlikely to hold in reality. Back in 1999, investors believed that every internet company would eventually turn profitable. Most did not. Today, investors seem to assume that every AI company will find vast markets and generate massive revenues. Most probably will not. While the technology is functional and genuine, the size of the markets that these companies target appears to be much smaller than the hype suggests, and the costs necessary for development and deployment have turned out to be higher than initially anticipated. To illustrate this point more concretely, consider the example of Inflection AI, a company founded by Mustafa Suleyman, a co-creator of DeepMind. This startup managed to raise a substantial sum of approximately $1.3 billion and developed a chatbot called Pi. While the technology works quite well and the product operates as intended, the stark reality is that few people are actually willing to pay for it. This example encapsulates a broader trend. Many companies are building impressive AI tools and solutions, yet they are struggling to convert that technological potential into revenue. The initial enthusiasm and funding surge have created lofty valuations, but the path to profitability remains uncertain for most. In summary, the landscape of artificial intelligence, its rapid energy consumption, soaring company valuations, and the current economic dynamics echo many of the warning signs that preceded previous market bubbles. The fundamental differences between genuine technological advances and inflated market expectations are becoming increasingly evident, and unless these disparities are addressed, a significant correction may be just over the horizon. In 2024, the landscape of the artificial intelligence industry has taken a significant turn, revealing a series of predictable patterns that have mirrored previous technological bubbles. During this year, Microsoft strategically acquired a talented team, effectively purchasing their expertise, while investing approximately $650 million to gain access to vital AI technology. Additionally, they made a high-profile move by recruiting a prominent figure, Salman, whose expertise further bolstered their position in the field. For the investors in Inflection, this meant recouping some of their initial investments, though the returns fell far short of the company's peak valuation, which had been around $1.3 billion. Meanwhile, Inflection itself had poured over $500 million into computational resources, developing complex AI models, and establishing the necessary infrastructure. Despite this substantial expenditure, the company generated only minimal revenue, and eventually, it was absorbed by a much larger corporation, with parts of its operations integrated into Microsoft's ecosystem. This sequence of events exemplifies a recurring pattern that seems poised to repeat itself again and again across the tech landscape. Numerous startups and tech companies raise billions of dollars in funding, only to spend enormous sums on computational capacity and top-tier talent, all the while struggling to generate sustainable revenue streams. When their efforts fail to attract steady income, these companies often become prime candidates for acquisition at a fraction of their original funding or face shut down entirely. This cycle highlights the fragility within the sector and underscores the immense challenges faced by those attempting to turn breakthrough AI ideas into profitable ventures. Now, let's consider what might trigger an inevitable collapse, because despite all the optimism and hype, a bubble of this nature will inevitably burst. The critical question remains, when exactly will this happen? History offers clear clues, showing that bubbles tend to explode when one of three particular events occurs. The first, and perhaps most dramatic, happens when a prominent, widely recognized company falters or collapses entirely. For example, during the financial crisis of 2008, Lehman Brothers' bankruptcy sent shockwaves through the economy, exposing vulnerabilities and triggering widespread panic. Similarly, the dot-com bubble in 1999 and 2000 created a similar atmosphere of chaos and realization that many of these tech giants were built on shaky foundations. When a major industry player, easily recognizable and heavily influential, goes bankrupt or experiences a devastating failure, it often acts as a trigger, revealing to the market that the emperor has no clothes. In the context of artificial intelligence, such a dramatic collapse could take the form of a large startup, one that has burned through billions of dollars, suddenly shutting its doors. Alternatively, it might involve a major technology corporation writing off billions in AI-related investments due to poor returns or failed projects. When the public and investors see these high-profile failures, widespread panic and reassessment tend to follow. The second key event that can cause a bubble to burst revolves around the stagnation of revenue growth. Investors pour enormous amounts of capital into AI projects with the expectation of rapid and sustained returns. However, when these returns fail to materialize, investor confidence begins to dwindle, resulting in a swift market correction. This pattern played out vividly in the year 2022 within the cryptocurrency space, where the market rapidly recognized that widespread mainstream adoption was not occurring as quickly as initially forecasted. Prices plummeted, and valuations that had seemed astronomical suddenly became unsustainable. A similar scenario is unfolding in the AI industry. For instance, when the number of new subscribers to platforms like ChatGPT plateaus noticeably, or when Microsoft reports that the revenue from its Copilot products is not meeting expectations, and Google admits that its Gemini AI project isn't generating significant new income, the market begins to reevaluate the true potential of these ventures. These admissions, when they arrive, serve as wake-up calls for investors, prompting a reassessment of valuation and growth prospects. The third and perhaps most ominous factor leading to a collapse involves the unsustainability of rising costs. As companies continue to pour billions of dollars into AI development, hardware infrastructure, and talent acquisition, there comes a point when expenses outstrip actual benefits. When the cost of maintaining and expanding operations becomes untenable, these firms are forced to cut back on spending. This reduction in expenditure can have a domino effect across the ecosystem. For example, Nvidia's revenues rely heavily on ongoing demand for its high-performance chips, which are essential for training and running advanced AI models. When companies halt their purchases or slow down their investments, Nvidia's income begins to decline. Construction of new data centers halts, layoffs become inevitable, and the entire industry finds itself caught in a damaging cycle. Reduced investment leads to lower revenues, which in turn cause stock prices of major firms to fall. As market capitalizations shrink, companies become even more reluctant or unable to sustain their spending, accelerating the contraction process. While we are not quite at this point yet, indications suggest we are much closer than most people realize. Envisioning the future crash, one can anticipate Nvidia's stock taking the earliest and most severe impact. As the most overvalued and heavily dependent on continuous AI spend, Nvidia's stock is poised to fall sharply once the slowdown begins. I predict a decline of between 50 and 70% from its peak price of around $900, potentially tumbling to less than $300 or even lower. Such a plunge would wipe out approximately $2 trillion in market value. While other big tech giants such as Microsoft, Google, Meta, and Amazon will experience declines as well, these will likely be less drastic, perhaps in the range of 20 to 40%, because they maintain diversified portfolios that extend beyond AI alone. Nonetheless, their divisions dedicated to AI could face substantial losses, including billions of dollars in impaired assets and data centers that no longer deliver the expected returns. AI startups, in particular, are expected to suffer the most. It is estimated that around 90% of these new companies will fail, shutting down operations, running out of capital, and disappearing from the market altogether. Only those with tangible revenue models and clear, sustainable pathways to profitability will survive the downturn. The rest will exhaust their funding, close their doors, and lay off employees across the board. This process will result in significant losses of billions of dollars in venture capital, mirroring the aftermath of the dot-com crash back at the turn of the century. During that period, hundreds of internet-based companies failed, and trillions of dollars in value vanished almost overnight. These historical precedents serve as stark reminders that, despite the current enthusiasm and lofty valuations, the AI industry is susceptible to the same kind of dramatic correction. The eventual burst of this bubble will undoubtedly be painful for many, but it is a natural and necessary part of the technological evolution. The industry gradually coalesced around a handful of dominant players, establishing a clear pattern that is likely to repeat itself within the realm of artificial intelligence as well. Just as in previous technological waves, only a select few companies boasting powerful models and tangible revenue streams will endure and continue to flourish. For instance, OpenAI could be among the survivors if it manages to turn a profit, while Anthropic stands a chance if it successfully scales its offerings. Meanwhile, giants such as Google and Microsoft will remain resilient largely because of their diversification across multiple sectors, which provides a buffer against the volatility of specific innovations. Conversely, the multitude of over 100 startups working on developing chatbot applications, image generation tools, and various AI-driven services will mostly fade into obscurity, as most of these nascent ventures fail to establish a lasting foothold in the market. Now, I would like to address a common counterargument to this perspective. Some may believe I am underestimating the potential of AI to discover enormous new revenue streams. It is possible that businesses will begin to pay billions of dollars for AI-based services, that consumer adoption will accelerate dramatically, and that a large portion of the population will subscribe to multiple AI products and platforms, fundamentally transforming the marketplace. While all these scenarios are within the realm of possibility, I hold the view that they are less likely to materialize for several reasons. The primary limitation lies in the scope of use cases. Yes, AI is capable of tasks such as composing emails, generating images, summarizing lengthy documents, and even writing code. But once a handful of advanced AI systems can perform these functions efficiently and effectively, the question arises, why would there be a need for 5 or more competing AI tools to do the same? The answer is straightforward. There would be no practical need for multiple solutions performing identical tasks. As a result, the market tends to consolidate, favoring 1 or 2 dominant players, while most other companies find themselves unable to sustain significant market share or profitability. Furthermore, the applicability of AI in enterprise settings also tends to be limited. Most organizations do not require bespoke AI models tailored explicitly to their unique needs. Instead, they primarily seek seamless integration of AI capabilities within their existing infrastructure. These integration activities are generally service-oriented, generating revenue through consulting and custom development work rather than through the sale of standalone products. Unlike scalable product sales, services do not lend themselves easily to mass markets because each implementation often demands custom code, adjustments, and ongoing support. Consequently, the profitability of offering such services remains capped, especially considering the substantial investment needed in infrastructure and talent. Even if anticipated widespread adoption of AI occurs within business environments, the revenue generated may still fall short of expectations. This is because the growth in revenue does not keep pace with the scaling of infrastructure expenses. Large companies, despite impressive investments, may find that the costs required to run powerful models and support extensive integrations do not diminish quickly enough to justify the expenditure. Another point often raised is that the costs associated with AI will continue to decline over time, particularly following the trend suggested by Moore's Law, which predicts that compute power becomes more affordable as technology advances. This could lead to decreased operational expenses and improved profit margins. While this trend may indeed hold true to some extent, evidenced by newer hardware such as Nvidia's latest Blackwell processors being more efficient than prior generations, the reduction in cost per query is relatively modest, perhaps around 20 to 30%. Moreover, these gains are partly offset by the trend toward developing ever larger, more sophisticated models. For example, future iterations like GPT-5 are expected to require significantly more computational resources to operate comfortably than their predecessors like GPT-4, even with improved hardware. Therefore, while some cost efficiencies are achievable, they are unlikely to be enough to eliminate the fundamental economic challenges associated with AI scaling. A final, often debated point is the concept of artificial general intelligence, or AGI. The idea that AI systems might eventually reach a level of capability where they can perform any intellectual task a human can undertake. If such a breakthrough occurs, the revenue potential could be virtually unlimited, as AGI could replace a vast array of knowledge-based jobs, leading to trillions of dollars worth of labor costs shifting into AI-driven income streams. However, there are substantial uncertainties surrounding this scenario. First, despite the hype surrounding AGI, current AI technology remains fundamentally narrow. These systems excel at specific tasks but lack true reasoning, long-term planning ability, or a genuine understanding of complex context. Experts estimate that the development of AGI could be anywhere from a decade away to 50 years or more, and no one can predict precisely when or if it will happen. Making massive investments based on a technology that might delay for decades is highly risky. Secondly, even in a hypothetical future where AGI becomes a reality, the economic models supporting its widespread deployment are still unclear. If AI can perform every form of knowledge work, who would be willing to pay for such services? If AI replaces human workers en masse, those workers would lose their income, leading to decreased consumer spending and ultimately contracting the economy. This phenomenon, known as the automation paradox, illustrates how technologies designed to eliminate jobs can simultaneously undermine the market base necessary for their own profitability. Therefore, the prospect of AGI generating trillions in revenue is not guaranteed. It may, in fact, pose significant challenges to sustainable economic growth and business models. In summary, while the future of AI holds immense promise and potential for disruption, the likelihood is that a relatively small number of companies will dominate the field, consolidating market share around robust, scalable models capable of generating solid revenues. The widespread adoption of AI across industries will face limitations driven by the nature of use cases, high infrastructure costs, and economic considerations, making rapid and unlimited revenue growth unlikely. The promise of cheaper, more efficient hardware and the eventual arrival of AGI remains speculative, fraught with uncertainties and complicated by fundamental economic and technological constraints. An economic crisis of significant proportions may be on the horizon, one that demands a fundamental overhaul of the very way society functions and organizes itself. Such a crisis would go far beyond the typical fluctuations that generate trillions of dollars in revenue for tech giants through subscription services, advertising, and various platforms. Instead, it would reflect a deep-seated disruption, compelling us to rethink the entire economic and technological landscape. Now, let's consider what steps you might take if you have investments tied to artificial intelligence stocks. Many investors are currently involved, some directly holding shares in companies like Nvidia, while others have exposure through broader index funds that are heavily weighted toward the technology sector. In this context, my guidance, which is not formal financial advice, but rather an analytical perspective, suggests that AI stocks are currently overvalued and are vulnerable to a significant correction. If your holdings in Nvidia are above the $700 mark, you are exposed to considerable risk. It might be prudent to start thinking about securing some of your gains now. Those who purchased Nvidia shares at around $200 or $300 have already realized substantial profits. It's wise to consider locking in these gains, because when the inevitable correction arrives, it will likely be swift and severe, impacting many investors simultaneously. On the other hand, owning shares in large technology firms such as Microsoft, Google, or Amazon offers somewhat greater safety, yet it remains far from risk-free. While these giants are expected to survive the downturn, their stock valuations are likely to shrink considerably. A realistic decline could range from 20 to 40%. If you are comfortable enduring such a reduction, it might be best to stay put. However, if the potential loss is too unsettling, reducing your exposure and reallocating funds into safer, less volatile assets could be a more strategic move. For those involved in AI startups, whether through venture capital funds or special purpose vehicles, the risk of failure remains alarmingly high. Statistically, roughly 90% of such ventures might end up failing, which makes them akin to high-stakes lottery tickets. Some ventures will succeed spectacularly and deliver enormous returns, but the majority will essentially become worthless. Therefore, it's crucial to only invest what you can afford to lose without jeopardizing your financial stability. In general, a prudent strategy for most investors would involve decreasing exposure to AI-related assets and seeking diversification across different sectors and asset classes. While trying to precisely time the peak of the bubble is nearly impossible and should be avoided, it's equally unwise to hold on during the entire downturn. The warning signs of a bubble are quite evident: a rapid escalation in valuations followed by an inevitable burst. The only uncertainty lies in the exact moment of the pop. Since timing bubbles is inherently unpredictable, a sensible approach involves gradually reducing risk, taking some profits off the table, and reallocating those funds into more stable, less speculative assets. Remaining patient and awaiting the downturn allows one to observe the subsequent opportunities that inevitably emerge, precisely when the market has fallen to more reasonable levels. Once the collapse is complete, there will be a window of opportunity to purchase high-quality companies at prices well below their former peaks. But that opportunity only arises after the decline, not before. As for the expected timeline, in the year 2025, AI spending is projected to continue its growth journey, though at a markedly slower pace than before. Instead of growing at a rate of 50% year over year, growth might slow down to around 20%, which could prove disappointing to investors who had become accustomed to rapid expansion. Such a slowdown would likely cause stock prices to begin drifting downward. By the middle of the year 2026, some of the major corporations involved in AI development will start reporting that their revenue from AI-related activities is not meeting previously optimistic expectations. In particular, Nvidia's stock could have fallen by anywhere from 40 to 50% from its all-time high. Moving into 2027, the bubble will be undeniably burst. Many AI startups will be failing en masse, and valuations across the industry will have plummeted. The intense hype and soaring expectations will give way to disillusionment and a realization that much of the market was driven by speculation. During this phase, industry consolidation will accelerate as only the most solid and strategically positioned companies survive. This period marks the trough of the cycle. Looking ahead to 2028 or 2029, stability begins to return. The surviving firms will have established genuine, sustainable businesses. Their revenues will grow at a steady, predictable pace, and some level of profitability will become common. Technological advances will be integrated into the broader economy at levels that are sustainable over the long term. However, the total market value of AI companies will be vastly diminished, perhaps reduced from the peak valuation of $10 trillion to a more modest $2 trillion, with around $8 trillion wiped out in the process. This pattern is characteristic of technology bubbles. Initial enthusiasm and overinvestment drive valuations far beyond what the core technologies and market fundamentals can support. When the bubble bursts, the excess funds are cleared out, leaving only those companies with real value and viable business models. Over the following decade or two, the technology will continue to evolve and become ingrained into everyday life, albeit in a quieter, less glamorous form. It will become standard infrastructure, much like electricity or the internet, ubiquitous, unnoticed, and essential. This is precisely what will happen to artificial intelligence. It will not fade away or disappear entirely, but will transform from the focus of hype and speculation into a foundational aspect of modern industry and society, quietly powering innovations and efficiencies at a background level. The excitement will die down, the market will settle, and AI will become a normal, essential part of the technological landscape, integrated, reliable, and less sensationalized. Just like the internet, databases, and cloud computing before them, artificial intelligence remains a crucial component of modern technology, indispensable yet lacking the immediate excitement that often accompanies new innovations. Such technologies are valued primarily for their practical utility rather than for sensational hype, and this trend is reflected clearly in the financial valuations they command. Over the past 3 years, an astonishing sum, amounting to $10 trillion, has been poured into AI development and integration. Despite this massive influx of capital, the anticipated financial returns seem disproportionate. Annual revenues are estimated to be somewhere between $60 billion and $80 billion, a figure that, when examined closely, doesn't quite add up. The underlying math appears off balance. The costs involved in developing and deploying AI systems are extraordinarily high, while the income generated from their use remains relatively modest. Moreover, the practical applications and use cases that were once declared to be limitless now appear more constrained and limited than originally promised. In the stock market, many companies invested heavily in AI are valued as if perfection is the minimal expectation. Their stock prices are often set at levels that imply flawless performance and unlimited growth potential, which is simply unrealistic given the current state of technology and market maturity. This phenomenon is characteristic of a bubble, an asset class inflated beyond its intrinsic worth, not because AI technology itself is fake or fundamentally flawed, but because the lofty expectations surrounding it are fundamentally unachievable in the near term. When the reality of what AI can deliver clashes with the sky-high assumptions that investors and developers have set, the inevitable outcome is that the true value will be exposed. History shows that such disconnects seldom end well. The bubble will eventually burst as overinflated valuations deflate to more reasonable levels. The question that looms large now is whether this collapse will occur quietly and gradually, or whether it will be abrupt and dramatic. The only certainty is that a correction is unavoidable. Sooner or later, the illusion of perfection will give way to plain, hard facts. The real concern is whether you will recognize the signs of this impending downturn in time to protect yourself, or whether you will be caught off guard when the inevitable readjustment begins.